Thanks for watching. This is Dan Strongin, and this is my Cheese Reporter interview with Linnea Burnham, who was a winner of the Watson Award. Welcome, Linnea.
It's great to be here.
Why don't you tell us first a little bit about yourself? I mean, you got this chance of a lifetime that you know, to see what the world is like for small artisan cheesemakers, literally the world. And I'm just curious to know, you know, do you come from a farming family? What ignited your interest in this?
Yeah, I got a passion for dairy farming from my grandfather, who used to raise Holstein cows, and so I've grown up with that. And then in high school, I became a Rotary exchange student in the Franche-Comté region of France, where I discovered cheese. And my passion for cheese really is, at its roots, it's a passion for home and a passion for dairy agriculture, but cheese adds a whole layer of complexity to that.
Mm-hmm. And so can you tell us just a little bit, because most people have really, they would probably be embarrassed to admit it, but they have absolutely no idea what the Watson is and how one goes about getting it.
Yeah, the Watson is the most incredible fellowship that exists in the entire world. It's a grant awarded to seniors graduating from American colleges to complete a project of personal significance on a global scale. Mm. And what's really remarkable about the Watson is that it can be about anything. They look for graduating seniors who have a lot of passion, and that passion can be anything from cheese making to studying comedy around the world, to studying cinema, to studying renewable energy. It's really, it can be about anything.
Well, that's wonderful. What an amazing thing to do, though not surprising considering what, you know, IBM was like itself as a company. But the so how did you find out about it?
I found I graduated from Middlebury College in Vermont, and my senior fall, I remember walking into my guidance counselor's office and telling them that all I wanted to do after graduation was learn more about cheese. And I asked her if there was anything, any fellowships, anything out there at all that could help me do that. And she said there wasn't, but that I should look into the Watson. And as soon as I started reading about the Watson, I felt that we were just a match that was perfect. So it was, I think some people hear about the Watson and then maybe think of a project that resonates with them. For me, it was the opposite. I knew what I wanted to do, and then the Watson was a way to make that happen.
Oh, that's wonderful. And so what was the application? You put in an application and then they interview you? How many times?
It's a really long application process. It starts with your local college or university, and then eventually makes it to the national level. And so, in my case, that meant first passing through all the hoops at Middlebury and being selected as a Watson Fellow from Middlebury. And from there, I was put into the national pool, where I had an interview with the Watson Foundation and was reviewed by their committee for the final decision.
Were you a little nervous going into the interview? I know I would be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially, I mean, we're talking about a fellowship of a lifetime. It's an incredible opportunity to be a Watson Fellow and to study cheesemaking around the world. I was incredibly nervous about it.
So just to help people who may not, you know, understand clearly what a fellowship is, though I doubt there are very many, but basically, if I'm correct, it meant that they give you enough money to be able to follow your passion around the world but for how long?
The Watson Fellowship is for 12 months,
mm-hmm.
and each fellow is awarded $30,000.
Wow.
And they use that money they can use that money to best fit their project. Every project is completely different, but each fellow has to live off of that sum, and it should cover everything from plane tickets to lodging to food to project-related expenses for the 12-month
mm-hmm.
duration.
So there was a lot of work in planning on your part to make this happen.
Definitely, yeah. And the first, certainly during the application process, I had to figure out contacts in every country and figure out what I was going to do in every country. And I had to share all that with the Watson Foundation ahead of time. But my project did change a lot through the year. Initially, I had everything planned out, and then I realized that there's something special about not planning everything out and arriving in a country with my mind and heart completely open and seeing where that would take me in terms of that.
So you kind of did a mixture of those two. You had followed some plans, and some things you just did by showing up with a smile on your face.
Yeah.
Show me the cheese.
Yeah, and some places I couldn't plan ahead either. One of my last project countries was Mongolia, and there's no way to get in touch with Mongolian nomads who are making cheese in the countryside beforehand. You just have to show up and smile on your face. So.
Okay, so let me look at my notes here. I'll edit the silly parts out. Don't worry. We'll look like we're real professionals. Okay, and so how did you feel? When you got the news, when you got the letter that you were awarded? You must have been ecstatic.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I realized as soon as I got the letter that my whole life was going to change, and all of a sudden I'd graduated from college, and within a few months I was about to leave home with a backpack and be traveling by myself for the next year. I remember feeling incredibly, excited, ecstatic. Kind of felt like crying at the same time, but mostly I felt empowered because my passion for cheese was something that I'd always deeply cared about, and then getting the support from the Watson Foundation to take my project and do this, pursue it on a global scale, was this moment of wow, someone else sees that cheese is important, and it's not just about cheese, but it's about so much else. It's about sustainability. It's about protecting our landscapes, our traditions, our cultures all around the world, and being able to convince the Watson Foundation that that's what this is about, more than just cheese, and that they believe in me was huge.
You must have been proud of yourself. I know I'm proud of you. I'm just listening to it. So that's a good thing. It's a wonderful opportunity not everybody knows what they want to do when they leave college, and that's fine too. But to know what you want to do and have a passion for it, and then get the opportunity, it's both a privilege and it's a pleasure, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So, in a nutshell, which, life is complicated and we can't always put things in nutshells, but everybody wants things in a nutshell. What was your core idea in doing this particular project? What was it? Anthropological, trying to understand the cultures, trying to look at agricultural practices, change the world? What were your thinking? What was your thinking?
Let's see. Initially, my project, well, I've always been really fascinated in cheese as a form of national self-identity. And I've been really particularly interested in the recent explosion of artisan cheesemaking that seems to be happening not just in my home in Vermont in the US, but all around the world as well. And so my project started with those questions. But let's see, it really became... it's almost a hard question. It's a hard question. Initially, I went into my project wanting to understand why do we have an explosion of artisan cheesemaking that's happening right now? What? And but as I was working on my project, it just kept evolving from as I started exploring the links between cheese and identity, and I started thinking about cheese as started thinking about the future of agriculture and how cheese can be both a product that is incredibly local but also exported all around the world as well. But I guess to get back to your question, which was in a nutshell, what was my project about? Surprisingly, I don't know, almost hard to answer because to me it became to be about so many things.
That's perfectly understandable, and that's a very good answer. I actually think you did a very good job of giving a flavor of what it's about. It is amazing how artisan cheese, as just from my experience, how it's exploding around the world.
I think it's reading that in the past it seemed you were a cheesemaker because you didn't have a choice, because your family was a cheesemaker, your father was a cheesemaker. But today people are going to cheesemaking and it's by choice, and oftentimes it's people who come from non-agricultural backgrounds at all who are starting to make cheese, and it's not just happening in the U.S., but it's happening in South Africa, it's happening in Norway, it's happening all over the world, and
it's very interesting. It's like some great human need after many years of industrial agriculture to go back to something interesting. So, where have you been in this incredible year? That's just, has it ended now, or is it just coming to an end?
It just came. Well, yeah, it just came to an end. I got back to the US less than a week ago. Yeah, but it's not sad at all for me. I've been thinking about this a lot, and the Watson Fellowship really empowered me and inspired me, and I've learned so much about cheese this year, and I don't see the fellowship as ending at all, but it's really this is the beginning of a lifelong journey dedicated to cheese. So I don't feel particularly sad, actually. Especially seeing as the Watson, it gave me so many skills that I feel like I can handle any situation. But anyways, to answer your question about where did I go, my Watson Fellowship started last June, and I've been to 7 different countries. I tried to spend 2 to 2.5 months in each country, but and I extended my fellowship actually to 14 months. And I started in Norway. I was in Norway, England, Italy, Switzerland, and then I left Europe, and I spent the rest of my time in South Africa, Brazil, and Mongolia.
I mean, just to go to those places and not as a tourist per se is fascinating, because they're very different places.
Yeah.
What would you say you found to be the same? Something they had in common?
Among all these places, well, cheese is the common thread of my project. Yeah, I guess let's say
this is a Brazilian hand signal. This means duh, like the ice cream cone, duh, of course. And what was the most different place of all, from your experience, most different of all that you went to in these journeys?
I gotta say Mongolia was the most different, and I chose Mongolia because I really wanted to. Initially my project was just Europe focused, but then I wanted to push myself, and I ended up going to South Africa and Brazil because I wanted to see how European cheese traditions have been adapted to different climates and cultures and places through colonization and through imperialism. And the reason though that I chose Mongolia was to see what cheesemaking was like. I wanted to see what cheesemaking was like in a country that had not been industrialized or had not been influenced by larger economic pressures. And so Mongolia was completely, it was really unlike any other country I've been to study cheese. I arrived in Mongolia, and I didn't have any contacts beforehand, but I was lucky when I arrived in Ulaanbaatar to meet someone who spoke English, which is really rare in Mongolia. And she was able to, and I told her about my project, and she told me that, she said I could go stay with her cousin's cousins somewhere in the countryside and learn about cheese making. And so when you get an offer like
what could be better?
Yeah, and you get an offer like that, you just don't say no. You say yes immediately. And so I ended up living in a yurt with her family, her cousin's cousins, in the countryside for a month making cheese. And not only was adjusting to yurt life in Mongolia a big difference, but when it comes to cheese making, we would everything was so, I want to say kind of primitive, and it was all about survival. We would use whatever resources we had, and that meant collecting dried cow manure and using that to heat the milk to make the cheese. And there's no added culture, there's no rennet, there's no technical instruments at all for measuring temperature or pH or anything. And to coagulate the milk, we used a soured horse milk that had been saved for over a year. And so it's just, everything about it was completely different. There's no salt, there's no yeah, no.
Were they using horse milk to make the cheese, or did they have yaks, or what did they use to get their milk?
We were using just cow milk. They also milk horses in the summer. I was there in April and May, and so we didn't have any horse milk at that time, just cow milk. They milk about 10 cows by hand, and the soured horse milk was used to coagulate our cow milk in order.
Interesting. So,
yeah, it's completely, yeah.
As an interesting side note to all of this, most people, and probably your parents, were a little nervous for a young woman who is unfamiliar with the culture to go all the way across the world and just kind of show up at somebody's yurt from somebody you met by chance. I would think that this kind of gives you a little bit of a faith about people in the world, you know what I mean? That, most people think of, it stops people from these adventures is they're afraid something bad will happen. But something good happened instead.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought about that a lot on my year, having never traveled far from home before, and here I was traveling all alone the entire year, planning my entire itinerary, where I was going meeting strangers at every step of the way. And sometimes I felt that the whole year was a big test of my faith in humanity that always proved positive. But
let's look at Brazil, because of course I'm, what do you call it? I like Brazil and I live here. So how did you came to Brazil, did you have contacts beforehand, or did you make your contacts when you got here?
I had contacted one farm beforehand. And then when I had attended Cheese in Italy this year, and Cheese is, as you must know, is the biggest festival around cheese. And when I was there, I was able to get in touch with Guilherme. So, and he became my contact for Canastra. So between those two contacts, I was set for Brazil, and he took me everywhere in Canastra. And before that, this other farm was in Sao Paulo, and they make specialty coffee, but are interested in developing an artisan cheese component to their farm. And so I came.
What farm is that? Just out of curiosity.
It's the Croce family, and I'm trying to remember it's Fazenda Ambiental Fortaleza.
Oh, how wonderful. Now, next question.
Okay.
Can you share some examples of the cultures and their relationship with cheese?
Yes, I can. Actually, I was thinking about this question before when you shared it with me earlier, and it's kind of a hard one actually to know where to start with, but I was looking back through some old journals I had throughout the year, and at one point I'd started writing down sort of buzzwords to go with each country when it comes to cheese, and they're obviously not completely comprehensive, but I thought I would share a few of those with you if you like.
Oh, absolutely, please.
All right, so for me, Norway was all about, the buzzword for me for Norway is using resources. And if you go to Norway, it's all about the cheese is being made in the mountains, and they're using a lot of wood fire. They're making brunost, which requires an enormous amount of energy to make. Do you know what brunost is, by the way? Should I explain it? Brunost.
No, you probably should explain it. I know very little about Norwegian cheeses other than the commercial one.
Yeah, well, Norway was fascinating because they have a really rich cheese-making tradition that can be traced back thousands of years, and yet they've been overshadowed by French cheese, Swiss cheese, Italian cheese, Spanish cheese, you name it. But they've got all these really rich traditions, and one of the most iconic cheeses to Norway is brunost. And brunost is a cheese that's made cooking whey, leftover whey, and they boil it for hours and hours and hours, stirring it very, very slowly to make a brown cheese. And as it's cooking, the sugars caramelize and eventually solidifies down into this brunost. And so for me, Norway is about the resources, not only because, I think brunost is the epitome of that, using leftover whey to make a cheese and using a tremendous amount of wood to heat that cheese, because that's what they have. But a lot of Norwegian cheesemakers also have to, they move maybe 2 or 3 times throughout the summer to get their animals to fresher pasture. And sometimes with the fjords, this means loading goats onto boats and crossing the fjord and then going their mountainside. It's incredible, but it's really very, very simple and natural and all about resources.
That's great. Yeah. Can you share another example?
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. How about for me? Let's see. Well, I guess like Italy for me, which was the next country, was all Italy. The key word would be rustic. In that, when I was in Italy, I was traveling through northern Piedmont, and I was stopping in villages where you have maybe 10 to 15 year-round residents, and they're making cheese, but they're not using any industrial cultures at all. And we would go out into the field and milk cows by hand, sitting on stools. There's no milking parlor. I know that's not typical of all of Italy, but just where I was in particular, it was incredibly rustic. I said earlier that Mongolia was primitive. For me, Brazil was like gold was the word that came to mind. Maybe because of canastra, which evokes the idea of a treasure chest. But there has so much cultural value in Linneas, and so for me, it was all about gold.
Yeah, and they're very, very proud of it. It's one of the advantages of not being developed. It's a terrible thing to say because there are advantages being developed, but one of the advantages is that you still have a popular culture. It hasn't been co-opted. It's wonderful that way. And so, what about South Africa? What's your keyword? I'm going to cheat and get all from you.
Yeah. Let's see. South Africa. What did I say? Hang on, just give me a second to think. What was my South Africa?
Problem. We edit out. If you say something wrong, we just
can edit these
the beauty of the internet. You can manipulate the news.
Okay, that makes me feel a little more comfortable. Let's see. Well, South Africa. The first thing that comes to mind right now is I know what my word was. It was orange. Have you ever been to South Africa?
Never. I'm dying to go.
Okay, well, it's astounding it's an incredible country, an extraordinary landscape, and it's really fascinating the way they're building this cheese-making culture in a place that doesn't really traditionally have much of a cheese-eating culture. Right, orange is the word that comes to mind because so much of their cheese has annatto in it, and I'll never forget walking into the judge at the South African Dairy Championships, and there's just tables and tables of cheese, and the whole room looks orange. What a great impression.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Which brings me to next. I'm going to backtrack to other, but
okay.
Now that your year's coming to an end, what are your plans? Are you planning to do anything with this research, like write a book, have a film, sign a Hollywood contract? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think about this all the time. My goal right now is I've got so much knowledge and a really unique perspective of global cheese production and so much passion. I come out of this year feeling even more inspired about cheese, and there's nothing I want more than to keep working with artisan cheese and protecting the land, the cheesemakers, the landscapes, the cultures, traditions in some way. So as to writing a book, that's something I think about all the time, and I love writing, and I kept so many journals this year that will be a great base for stories, not only as a girl traveling alone in the world to study cheese, but also just about cheese. And sometimes I think about writing a cookbook as well, because I've been really fascinated. We were talking just a minute ago about how cheese, the relationships between cheese and culture, but something I kept on noticing and collecting recipes for was how the way we eat cheese changes from one culture to another. And in some places like Brazil, I was really struck by how much cheese is used in sweet things. For at least in Venus, I had many candies made with cheese or ice cream made with cheese. And then let's say like in Norway, you have cheese for breakfast, and in the US, it's something you have for dinner. I have all these recipes that I'd really like to put into a book that would change.
It's a wonderful idea, and I would think that there would be a market for it, because the story is more than just one that cheeseheads would like. It's a kind of remarkable story, a very rare opportunity on the level of someone who travels around the world on a sailboat. You know what I mean? It's a real adventure.
I've got so many great photos and so many stories, and I just want to share them. Like I said, Or no one really, we know a lot, or we think we do, about French cheese and Swiss cheese and Italian cheese, but there's countries like Brazil, like Norway, like South Africa, where there's a lot of really interesting things happening, and people don't really know about that, and I'd love to share those stories.
Yeah, I think it's important. It's the world had became a little homogenized, and the news we get about the world is very homogenized. And actually, while there are similarities, it's still a very rich, diverse world we live in.
Yeah, can't tell you how many times I was asked about American politics on my trip.
Yeah. Now, if people want to read more about your adventures, you have a blog, right?
Yeah, I do. So, and I'm going to keep maintaining that because I want to. There's so many stories I have to catch up on. So the blog is journeysofacheesegirl.wordpress.com. They can email me. My email's on the blog as well. I'd love to get in touch. And you were just asking me about what I'm planning to do with this year, if I'll write a book or who knows. I'm thinking about that. But right now I'm particularly interested in working in sort of the global exports of cheese, because I've got this really, really solid understanding of global markets and cheese around the world that I'd like to put to good use. So,
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, and I'll say this, looking to those people out there that are listening to this broadcast, if you're smart and you work in the import-export of cheese globally, Linnea would be a very, very good person to try to get into your organization.